Hello students, good afternoon. A very warm welcome to all of you. Myself Ashay Kumar, the faculty and mentor for history, your teacher for history. And today we are going to discuss a very exciting and engaging session with regards to a very important topic in our study of Indian history. Okay, and this topic or this section is called as a medieval India. So, as everyone knows that Indian history is divided into three parts: ancient Indian history, the medieval Indian history, and the modern Indian history. And to understand the process of the whole history, that is from ancient to modern, the medieval Indian history is very crucial. To understand the very process from ancient to the modern Indian history, or from beginning of the Indian history to the latest, that is India's independence in 1947, the main link or main chain is a medieval Indian history. And I know that all of you are very curious to know much more about medieval Indian history. Okay, because since ancient history is very goes back to very long time, so since it is very ancient, okay, as the name suggests, at least we get to know something about it out of our curiosity. Then since the modern history is very latest, again we focus our attention to understand the various aspects of the modern Indian history. But the very medieval Indian history, which lies in between, and which actually balances both aspects of the history. Many times we are not able to exactly know what exactly happened during that middle period as far as the Indian history are concerned. We don't know exactly what happened during that middle period as far as the Indian history is concerned. So that is what I would like to unveil the cover. I would like to get aside the whole cover as far as the medieval Indian history is concerned, and I will let you know the very rich and dynamic aspects of our history, our rich past during the medieval era. So before beginning anything, we should know, so what exactly is the era known as medieval era or a medieval India. So you will see that era, which basically begins from around 8th century AD to 18th century AD. Era which normally begins from around 8th century AD to the 18th century AD. That era is called as a medieval era or era of a medieval Indian history, roughly 1000 years, which is a very long time. And earlier the focus normally used to be on ancient history and modern history. Of course the focus was there on medieval history also, but yet much more was yet to get, much more was yet to know to all of us. So fortunately in the last few years, and especially after the independence of India, we have many more dynamic aspects, very interesting facts, very critical analysis of the different aspects of the middle period, that is from 8th century AD to 18th century AD, and that is what is exactly called as a medieval history. So now we will start about understanding, and we will start about building our basic blocks. We will start understanding and building our basic blocks as far as the middle period or a medieval history of India is concerned. A very interesting topic. And I also know that all of you are very curious. I also know that all of you are very curious to know what exactly lies in the treasure of medieval India. That all of you are also very curious to know that what exactly lies in the treasure called as a medieval India. Okay, so now I will tell you one by one that how basically the things were happening and the events were taking place in this medieval Indian history. And definitely we will start from around this 7th to 8th century only. when the different changes were being witnessed both in the context of North India and also in the context of the South India. Okay? Because we are dealing with the history of India as a whole, so we should get to know what exactly was happening during this period, okay, as far as North and South India is concerned. And today especially we are going to focus, okay, on the early part of medieval history. Okay? We are going to deal with early medieval Indian history, okay, that is from around 7th to 8th century AD till up to 12th century AD. Okay? That period of the medieval Indian history is called as a early medieval Indian history. So we will have the two parts of the medieval history. So first of our learning objective for today's class is that, or first of our learning objective for today's discussion is that we have to understand that how the medieval Indian history is divided, okay? In how many parts it is divided. So broadly we will see there are two divisions. Okay? There are two divisions as far as the medieval history is concerned. Okay? And we are dealing in Indian context. So first is about early medieval Indian history. And then, as I mentioned, second part will be the late medieval history. Okay? And as I am discussing that early part of the medieval Indian history, it will basically cover the time frame from around 750 AD, okay, till we can say at the end of 12th century AD. Okay, so almost 500 years or so will be covered as far as this early medieval history of India is concerned. Okay, this is also called as an era. Known as a pre-invasion period, okay, or pre-Turkish period. Okay, of course, I will also discuss that even though it is a pre-Turkish invasion period, and we also have to discuss about what exactly is a Turkish invasion, right? What exactly is a Turkish invasion, that also we have to discuss. But the point is that even though it is a pre-Turkish invasion period, that doesn't mean that there was no Turkish invasion as such. It is not exactly the case. You will find that Turkish invasions have started, right? But by and large, this era was dominated by Rajput. Okay? By and large, this era was dominated by Rajput kingdoms. Okay? One warrior community and its rise will be witnessed in India. Okay? And that community will be called as a Rajput community. That community is called as a Rajput community. And definitely we will discuss today about that Rajput community, okay, and the so-called Rajput kingdoms. So this is exactly what the early medieval India is we can find. Okay? And then we have second half, that is late medieval India, which will start from around 13th century and it will last up to 18th century. Okay? And this is a medieval India where you will find, okay, the Turkish rulers. You will find Turkish rulers, okay, and we have two Turkish empires known as Delhi Sultanate, and then we have the Mughal Empire. Okay? In that late medieval Indian history, we will find that there will be two Turkish empires. Okay? Because as I have told you, this was an era which goes back to pre-Turkish invasion period. This is an era, early medieval Indian era is an era which goes back to pre-Turkish invasion period. Now we will see by this era, there is a late medieval era, okay, Turkish kingdoms will emerge. The Turks who had came from outside India, they got firmly established in India. Okay? And then you will see the first Turkish empire known as the Delhi Sultanate. And when this empire declined, another Turkish race came in India with a name which bears the title of Mughals, and this becomes the Mughal Empire. So, this is what broadly the scenario is as far as our medieval Indian history is concerned. And of course, we also have to keep in mind the history of India as a whole, and the medieval Indian history in particular. It is not an history just to take into account the name of the kings. It is not an history just to know the kingdoms. It is not a history just to know the battles. But we have to see how the various socio-cultural processes, how the various religious developments took place in India. How the rulers, both the Indian rulers as well as those who came from outside, or so-called foreign rulers, how they basically ruled, what were the achievements as far as these rulers were concerned, and what exactly basically was the process through which the society, culture, economy, the administrative aspects of India, everything was shaped up. And that means the whole Indian society, the whole Indian economy, it was shaped up by the various developments which were taking place during this period. So this point also is very, very crucial for us to build our knowledge, the very basic knowledge or a foundational knowledge as far as the medieval Indian history is concerned. Okay, now we can see what we have to take into account. Okay, so as I have told you that we are going to deal today with the overview as far as what was the scenario in North India. What was the scenario in North India when the medieval India started? Okay, so we have to first keep in mind, and first we have to understand exactly that what was the scenario in North India when basically the medieval India started. So in case of early medieval India, okay, in case of early medieval India, okay, it is North India. We will find this map, and my friends, always keep in mind that whenever you are understanding the history, whenever you are learning the history, without map you cannot understand or learn the history properly. If you want to learn the history, if you want to enjoy the history, and if you want to basically understand the historical process properly, then you have to keep in mind that map is very, very important. You must have heard this adage that a picture speaks for 1,000 words. You must have heard this adage that a picture speaks for 1,000 words. So this is what exactly will give us an insights. This is what exactly will give us an insights that how exactly was North India in a time or time frame of 750 AD to 12th century AD. Okay? What exactly was a scenario in North India from 750 AD to 12th century AD. And as I have mentioned, this era is, of course, you can see here, this map is showing the India in 1050 AD. Okay? So one particular mark or a landmark of this whole early medieval India, okay? One particular landmark year or a kind of the so-called stage has been taken, whereby you can just understand how India was during the time of early medieval India. So 1050 AD has been taken as a midpoint as far as this Indian history is concerned. And of course this map is showing the political history or the so-called kingdoms which were there in North India and also in Deccan plus South India. So first we will focus upon the kingdoms which were there in North India. So you can easily see here, as I mentioned, this is an era known as a era for Rajput kingdoms. This is an era which is known as a era for Rajput kingdoms. So first thing and the first curious question which will come to the mind of everyone, all of you will ask this question. So sir, what exactly is meant by the term Rajput? You will ask that what exactly is meant by the term Rajput. So the point is that, or our answer is that, Rajput basically is a community, and Rajput basically is a community of a people who belong to a particular race and ethnicity. Rajput basically is a community of people who belong to specific race and ethnicity. Community of the specific race and ethnicity as far as the people are concerned. So what exactly is the case? Just briefly I will give you the highlight. Just briefly I will give you the highlight. So as you can see in the map, here the whole red line is representing the Rajput kingdoms of early medieval India. And now I am sure that everyone has got the idea what exactly is the early medieval India and what is the timeline as far as the early medieval Indian history is concerned. Of course, I will like to tell you that we don't have to remember any year. We don't have to remember any year. We just have to understand the sequence. If the years or centuries are given, they are given only to understand the sequence of the Indian history. So just like we have a Facebook timeline, similarly Indian history also has its own timeline. So years are not important. The whole era and the sequence of important events in that era. The whole era and the sequence of important events in that era is important. So since more or less this is a Rajput era, so that's why first we have to understand in a North Indian context that who are Rajput. Because if you observe this map, what you will get to know? You will get to know that Rajputs are there as a community, and this community built their kingdoms only in the north and part of central India. So Rajput kingdoms, Rajput as a community of a particular race and ethnicity is found only in the north and central India. We don't find the Rajputs as far as the Deccan and South India is concerned. The map of Deccan and South India I have it in a separate slide, and that map will make it very clear. That map will make it very clear that what was exactly a scenario in Deccan and South India. So that we will see little later. But first we will get to know that what exactly are the Rajput kingdoms and what is the term Rajput. So as I have mentioned, these are the peoples who belong to particular ethnicity and race. So there are different views among the historians. So I will just give a brief highlight for our basic understanding that how the Rajput originated. So there are different views about the origin of the Rajputs. First origin is about the so-called ancient Kshatriya heroes. So according to one view or according to one set of historians, Rajput originated from ancient Kshatriya heroes like Lord Rama of Ramayana and like Arjuna of Mahabharata. So this is the first view that the Rajput basically they are like a descendants or they are like a having the origin from Lord Rama or from Arjuna of the Mahabharata. So those Rajput who claim their origin from the legendary Lord Rama, they are called as a we can say Suryavamshi. They are called as a Suryavamshi Rajput. Why? Because Lord Rama belonged to that dynasty which was called as a Surya Vamshi dynasty. Lord Rama belonged to the dynasty called as a Surya Vamshi dynasty. Okay? And those Rajputs who claim their origins from Mahabharata heroes, those Rajputs who claim their origins from Mahabharata heroes, they are called as a Chandravamshi. They are called as a Chandravamshi. Okay? So the Mahabharata heroes like Pandavas, they used to claim their origin from the so-called moon. They had their origin from moon. And Lord Rama and his dynasty, they used to claim their origin from sun. That's why Rajput basically they also claim their origin from sun as well as moon. Then according to one more view, Rajput are foreigners. Okay? So okay, according to one view, the Rajputs have the foreign origin. So just before this medieval era started, and when ancient era was coming to an end, and I will tell you about that also. Okay? So at that time, there were certain foreign invasions, certain foreign races and tribes invaded India, and premier among them were the tribe of Gurjaras and the tribe of Huns. Okay? The tribe of Gurjaras and the tribe of Huns, and that's why the Rajput basically, according to certain set of historians, okay, they basically normally have the claim that Rajput have the foreign origin. From these foreign invading tribes of the ancient India, Rajputs saw their rise in a early medieval India. Okay? And you will see there is one historian known as James Todd. Okay? There is one historian known as James Todd. Okay? He basically gave this view about the foreign origin of the Rajput. Then we have one more view about origin. Okay? And this view is called as a so-called Agnikula Rajput theory. Okay? This view basically talks about the so-called Agnikula Rajput theory. So according to this Agnikula Rajput theory, what we will witness? This view basically has a sound backing by a text called as Prithviraj Raso. Okay, so we will see there was one famous poet known as Chand Bardai who belonged to around 12th century AD. He wrote the famous poetic work Prithviraj Raso. And in this poetic work Prithviraj Raso, what we will witness that he has mentioned about the sacrificial fire pit origin of the Rajput. So according to him, the Rajputs basically originated from a sacrificial fire. A big sacrifice was conducted near Mount Abu. A big sacrifice was conducted near Mount Abu, which is a place in Rajasthan. Somewhere here you will find the Mount Abu is there. So in a very long period of time, this sacrifice was conducted as far as the Mount Abu is concerned. And out of that sacrificial pit, certain Rajput families originated. Certain Rajput families originated. So the prominent Rajput families who claim their origin from this sacrificial pit, as far as the Mount Abu is concerned, they are called as Parmar. They are called as Chalukya. They are called as Chawana. And they also are called as Pratihara. So this Pratihara dynasty of the Rajputs, Chawana dynasty of the Rajput, the Chalukya dynasty of the Rajput, and the Parmar dynasty of the Rajput, they basically claim their origin as far as this sacrificial fire or Agnikula is concerned. So accordingly you will see we have both the mythical origin of the Rajput also, we have the so-called legendary or a proto-historic origin of the Rajputs also, going back to Mahabharata Ramayana period, and we also have the very foreign origin of the Rajputs also. Okay? According to one more set of historians, Rajputs even had an origin within India. Okay? So some of the historians, they are of the view that Rajput did not come from outside. They are a part and parcel of the very Indian subcontinent. Okay? This is also one of the origins as far as the Rajput is concerned. So what is the point? So when these Rajput kingdoms emerge, so how they emerge? First of all, whatever may be the different viewpoints about this origin of the Rajputs, but the fact is that Rajput as a community originated. Okay? What is the fact? That Rajput as a community originated. And what is more established fact is that Rajput is a warrior community. Rajput is a warrior community. Okay? So this point we have to keep in mind. And we also have to keep in mind that normally when the Rajput had their origin or they witnessed their rise, okay? So this is a time frame or this is a starting point or a beginning point as far as this early medieval Indian history is concerned. Because the very rise and the origin of the Rajput, okay? It acts like a transition phase when ancient period of the Indian history was coming to an end. Okay? The very origin of the Rajput and their rise is basically like a transition phase when the ancient period of the Indian history was coming to an end and India was witnessing the socio-economic as well as political transformation. Okay? India was witnessing socio-economic and political transformation and even the cultural transformation. Okay? This is very important. Okay? Socio-economic, okay? Cultural and political transformation. Okay? Was being witnessed in India as far as the end of ancient India is concerned and the start of medieval India is concerned. Okay? The end of ancient India is concerned and start of medieval India. Okay? So this is a very crucial point, and this point we have to always keep in mind. We have to fit that aspect into our mind as a part of our understanding process. Okay? Why? Because normally many times you will see, many times even many people will teach and they will say that when the so-called Hindu kingdoms ended and the Muslim invasions started, the medieval India starts. Okay? Ancient India will come to an end when the Hindu kingdoms came to an end, and when the Muslim invasions started from outside India, okay, the medieval India starts. This is a, we can say, very falsified view. Okay? This is a very falsified view as far as Indian history is concerned. So simple understanding of change from ancient to medieval India is that, as I have mentioned, when the social and economic processes, when the cultural dimensions and the cultural aspects, and when the political systems, okay, and along with that administrative systems, political systems and administrative systems, they are together. Okay? So when this socio-economic, cultural and political aspects or administrative aspect witness a transformation, okay, as a part of a process, then we can say the India also witness a shift from ancient history to the medieval history. Okay? India also witness a shift from an ancient history to a medieval history. So in North India, if you see, Emperor Harshavardhan, he was the last great emperor of India as far as the ancient history is concerned. Okay? So how this transition happened, now I am telling you. How this transition happened, I am now telling you. Okay? And I am sure that you have the whole understanding now how the changes were taking place, how the process of the history was evolving. Okay? History is always about the change, but with a continuity. Many things change because of the time, because his history is like a time machine. Okay? History is like a time machine from beginning to end. Okay? And that's why change always takes place. But yet you will find there is also consistency. Yet you will find there is always a consistency in the form of continuity. Despite many changes, you will find certain things are as it is, they don't change. Okay? So this is what the history is all about, and especially in the context of India. And this is how we have to develop our understanding. We have to build our blocks, okay, to understand the history. So the point is that, as I am mentioning, Emperor Harshavardhan he was the last great emperor of ancient India, okay? And especially in North India, he was the last great emperor in ancient India. When we take a look at North India, okay? And okay, Pulakesin II, he was the last great emperor, okay, as far as the Deccan and South India was concerned. Okay. When we take a look at Deccan and South India, Pulakesin II, he was the last great emperor as far as Deccan and South India is concerned. And this Pulakesin II, he belonged to this dynasty, that is Chalukya dynasty. Okay. This Pulakesin II, he belonged to Chalukya dynasty. So the point is that roughly when both these great rulers of North and South, they died, okay, there was a political instability. There was a political instability in India, okay, especially in North India. At least in South India, even after the death of Pulakesin II, okay, in the case of Deccan and South India, even after the death of Pulakesin II, there were other rulers who were able to maintain the kingdoms in Deccan and South India. Okay? There were other rulers who were able to maintain their kingdoms in Deccan and South India. But if you see the North India especially, then North India fell into political chaos. North India fell into political chaos as far as the death of Harshavardhan is concerned. And there was a transition phase of around a century. There was a transition phase of around a century. Okay? Okay? So from around 650 AD to that 750 AD, this was like a period of a century where you will see that political chaos were there in North India. Why? Because there was no strong empire. There was no strong empire in North India. The whole North India now started to get divided into small principalities. The whole North India started to get divided into small principalities and small kingdoms. And these small kingdoms, they were weak. They did not have a strong rulers. They did not have a strong political systems. They did not have a sound financial and revenue resources. What I said, I will repeat. These all small kingdoms which were emerging as far as the North India is concerned, we witness that they did not have the strong rulers. We will also see that they did not have the financial resources, and they also did not have a strong system of government and administration. And that's why they themselves were weak, and none of them was in a position to defend India against any kind of attack we may have. None of them was very efficient and very strong to defend India from any kind of attack which India may witness. So this point we have to keep in mind. And in this so-called century of 650 to 750 AD, we will see the Rajputs have their origin. The Rajput witness their origins. So out of these small principalities only, you will see that as a part of great social intermixture, as a part of great social and cultural intermixture, as far as Indian society was concerned, origin of the Rajputs was witnessed. Origin of Rajputs was witnessed. And then you will see, once this origin of the Rajputs was witnessed, then we will see that the different Rajput families emerged. So whatever Rajput kingdoms we are witnessing here, so we can say we have Chauhanas, we have Parmar, we have Solanki, we have Gadwal, we have Tomars, we have Chandel, we have Pratihar. Okay? So we will see that all these Rajput kingdoms, they were like a families, they were like a dynasties, and they got established themselves in a different parts of North and Central India. Okay? They got established themselves in a different parts of North and Central India, and gradually they started to become strong. Okay? Gradually they started becoming strong, but the point was that none of them could become completely strong, okay? Because as I have told you, Rajput community as a whole, it was a warrior race. The Rajput community as a whole, it was a warrior race, and these dynasties and the kingdoms which emerged, they belong to one single race only. Yet, despite belonging to one single race, they had differences among them. Okay? They had their own social differences, they had their own cultural differences. Okay? And what we will see, all of them, despite being Kshatriya, okay, they also got divided into the caste structure of India. Okay? The so-called Rajput, they also got divided into the caste structures of India. Okay? And that's why you will see that these Rajputs, despite being a warrior class and despite being very strong individually also, they could not pose any kind of unity. They could not pose any kind of unity as far as the foreign invaders were concerned. So we will see that this whole era from 750 AD to 12th century AD, this is an era for Rajputs, for 450 years of Rajput era. And we saw many strong kingdoms and many strong individual rulers. Like example, the so-called Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. At one point of time, it was the strongest dynasty in whole of North India. Okay? And Nagabhatta first, he was a founder as far as this dynasty was concerned. Okay? And you will see this dynasty, it basically was able to defend India from foreign invasions. Okay? When Arabs were invading India, the so-called Gurjara Pratihara dynasty, it defended India. Yet you will see, despite the fact that this dynasty was strong, okay, and it created a strong kingdom, but still we will see once this dynasty started declining, India could not witness, okay, the same kind of defense which was necessary against the invading tribes like Arabs, okay, and the Turks who were consistently attacking India. Okay, the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty was like one exception, and after Gurjara Pratihara dynasties, you will see so many dynasties came. After Gurjara Pratihara dynasty, you will see so many dynasties came, and unfortunately, all of them were fighting among themselves. And since all of them were fighting among themselves, okay, so all of them became weak, because everyone knows, united we stand and divided we fall. Okay? United we stand and divided we fall. So if ultimately the foreign invaders like Arabs and Turks came to India, okay? If ultimately the foreign invaders like Arabs and Turks, they came to India, that was mainly because despite Rajput being a very powerful class, okay? Despite Rajput being a very powerful ruling class, they could not unite among themselves. They were divided by their own egos. Okay? They were divided by castes. Okay? Despite belonging to a Kshatriya class as a whole, okay? The Rajput society was divided into caste, and as such, other caste or people of other caste, they were not basically allowed to be a part as far as the warfare was concerned. And that's why the Rajputs could not even get a support of their own people. Why? Because of the caste issues. And individually also you will see all these Rajput kingdoms, they were fighting among themselves, because all of them was having the single objective, that who will rule the whole North India? Okay? Out of us, who will rule the whole North India? That was a single objective they had, and that's why, despite having a consistent foreign invasions, okay? And the foreign invasions were coming from here. Foreign invasions, they were coming from here, okay? And despite having a consistent foreign invasions, we will see none of the Rajputs, okay? None of the Rajput kingdoms that was able to rise up to a defense as far as India was concerned. Okay? None of the Rajput kingdom was possibly rise to the defense, okay, as far as India was concerned. And because of that, you will see the historical transformation of India took place. Because of that, you will see the historical transformation of India took place. Okay? Of course, these Rajput kingdoms, they also have their own positives. Okay? They have their unique cultural contribution in the terms of temples, okay? In the terms of development of architecture, in terms of development of poetic works, the linguistic developments of India, okay? The great poets and so on. Still, you will see society as a whole, political system as a whole, okay? Economic development as a whole, these Rajput kingdoms could not give a stability to India. These Rajput kingdoms could not give a stability to India, and the end result was that India witnessed the foreign invasions, and as we will see later, the very called Turkish era will be established, okay? And the Turkish invaders, they will establish the big empires as far as India is concerned. So in that fashion, basically, this is a very interesting lookout as to how India was being transformed, how the events were taking shape, how the things were changing as far as the transition from ancient to medieval India is concerned. And this transition phase of early medieval India is very, very crucial to us for our basic understanding and building blocks to have the sound mastery and knowledge over the medieval India. So my friends, I am definitely sure that you must have enjoyed the today's session, okay? And because you also have a very strong and zeal for understanding and knowing that history, that curiosity, okay? So always definitely you should maintain this curiosity, because history is the knowledge of our past, and we can change our future and even change our current or present situations, okay, by understanding the history. So on this note, I will take the leave of all of you, and again we will meet in the next exciting session to discuss the further important and interesting topic. Till then, goodbye and have a good day, a good weekend. Thank you very much.